Welcome to the Lutheran Ladies Lounge podcast. I'm Sarah.
I'm Erin.
I'm Bree.
And I'm Rachel.
It's a hymn sing with Sarah episode today. I'm so excited because it's Lent and it's hymns.
I was going to ask, are you just so happy right now, Sarah?
I'm so happy. And this is actually kind of going to be a bit of a two-parter because this episode is diving into the hymns in general and some really in-depth stuff on a couple of them. And then in a couple of weeks later in Lent, we'll have the actual sung version with a group. And I think that's going to actually drop on Good Friday. So you'll have some nice contemplative, maybe, music on Good Friday to listen to. So a bit of a two-parter-ish, kind of. So there won't be music tacked onto the end of this one. Sorry. But it'll come later. So this is Lenten hymn sing. This is like one of my favorite times of the year for hymns. There are so many good ones. I think there were like 42 options, I think, in the Facebook poll that I put out. Yeah, 42 options. Granted, not all of them were actual hymns from the Lent section of the hymnal. I think there's 37 or so in the Lent section. But before I even get into stuff, I wanted to give a shout out to Concordia Publishing House and the Hymnal Companion. If you don't have a Hymnal Companion yet, you for real need to go get one. I know they're not cheap, but it's totally worth the price to get these books. One of the books is all of the texts and the tunes. It's gigantic. And then the other book is all of the people, the tune and text writers. There's so much information in these. You can spend like weeks upon weeks. And there was a comment from, I may butcher your name, Gerhardt. Hopefully that wasn't terrible. She said, the Hymnal Companion is awesome. We have the congregational copy sitting on a table in the narthex open to one of the hymns of the day. After service, I see several members stop and read over it. I need to find a more formal way to display it. What a wealth of knowledge, which I thought was a fantastic idea for congregations. So if your pastor has one, ask if you can lay it out in the narthex or somewhere and have it open to the hymn of the day for Sunday so that everyone can read out of it. I think that was a great idea.
That's cool.
I put a poll up in the Facebook group. This time I did not ask you to choose one because obviously that's impossible for pretty much everybody. And some people still complain that I was making you choose it all, so I'm sorry. But I had to get some information. And so people were picking their favorites. There's a ton of, I don't know, like 90 some comments or something on this poll on Facebook. And some of the things that I noticed when I was reading through and looking at the results from the poll, that our favorites they tend to be driven by emotions and memories. I think nearly all of the comments on the page, people had stories about when they were kids, or, you know, when somebody passed away and they sang a Lenten hymn, or, you know, this is the one that their grandparents used to sing to them, or Dee and loving to sing hymns at the top of her voice on her lawnmower, which I thought was fantastic. So good for you, Dee.
Yes, Dee.
My favorite comment on on the whole thing. And I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with that. You know, all of the Lenten hymns in our hymnal, they all have great texts. You know, they all point you to Christ. They all point you to suffering and death for our sins. And so a lot of times we do connect to them emotionally just because of whatever connects us to those hymns. You know, a lot of mine are from my own childhood. I grew up with a Traore service on Good Friday, and it was pretty much the same service we would sing the same hymns probably every year. So my favorites I was recognizing when I actually went through and did the poll myself, which was really hard. When I went through it and did the poll, a lot of the ones that I was picking, I remember are ones that I used to sing on Good Friday in my own church. And so it's the same thing for me, that a lot of the ones that are my favorites are the ones that I've been singing for the last 30 years of my life. So of course they're probably going to be my favorites because they're the ones that are stuck in my brain, and I can, recite the stanzas without having to look at the hymnal. And Lent and Easter, it's also a time of the year in the church when we have heightened emotions anyway, because during the season of Lent, we're meditating on Christ's suffering, and maybe we've given something up for Lent. So we're already in this weird state of self-control and aware of ourselves a little bit more, building up to, Easter Vigil, which is my favorite service of the year. It's fantastic. Easter Vigil. Sorry, I get really excited about it. It's like a
I love
2.5
when you
hours.
just nerd out, dude. It's my favorite.
If you have a church near you with an Easter Vigil, go. It is so worth it. Anyway, Easter Vigil and Easter morning, building up to the joy that we have on Easter morning. So we're already in this state of heightened emotions during Lent. And the other thing that I found interesting just about my own favorites was a lot of them aren't actually in the Lent section of the hymnal. They're in the Holy Week section of the hymnal because they're the ones that we sing on Good Friday. And I think that is because they tend to be the ones with even more graphic writing. And the words like hit you like a ton of bricks. Like these are no holds barred kind of hymn texts. Like you are getting hit over the head with law.
Warm, soft, fluffy.
No, not at all. And I think, and I don't know if that's a universal thing. I don't know if you guys are like this, but I tend to gravitate towards the hymns that just, I mean, they lay it out there.
I think that's why Good Friday hymns are my favorite hymns.
Yeah. Nothing's hidden. It is laid out.
Yep.
Another thing I noticed, I allowed people to add their own hymns because, of course, I can't just give you the hymns that I think you guys should pick from. So a lot of people were adding hymns that aren't in the Lent section of the hymnal, which I found really intriguing. I don't know if I sing a lot of hymns outside of the Lent section of the hymnal. Maybe I'm going to pay attention to that this year because I don't think I've ever paid attention to that. But like 543, What Wondrous Love Is This, which I love that hymn. 547, The Lamb. 629, What Is This Bread? Which is by the Bowies, which are wonderful people. 542, When I Behold Jesus Christ. It's a wonderful Ethiopian one. So there's hymns from the rest of the hymnal that we also sing during Lent. And just, I was trying to pick my favorite one going through there, and I kept thinking of these, of just like single stanzas in all of these hymns that just, they pop out in my head. Because when we go through Lent, I almost treat those as little prayers when we get to them, because a single stanza has it all wrapped up with a nice bow on top. So the other thing about all of these that I was noticing is that all of these hymns in our hymnal and in the Lent section specifically too, they span hundreds of years, which if you think about it is a little mind-blowing, that we're singing the music of the church, that was written 10 years ago, well, 20 now with the hymnal. But that also goes back to, the 500s, which is crazy and also awesome. Like we're singing the same things during Lent that it's possible that our brothers and sisters in Christ hundreds of years ago were also singing, which is literally giving me goosebumps right now.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and there's like 554, Sing My Tongue the Glorious Battle, and 455, The Royal Banners Forward Go, written by Venantius Honorius Fortunatus.
There it is.
We'll just call him Fortunatus. He lived 530 to 609. Super cool. And then we have 445, When You Woke That Thursday Morning by Yaroslav Vaida, who was born in 1919. So, I mean, you have this wonderful span of hymns. And then Paul Gerhardt, I actually get to talk about Paul Gerhardt today, so I'm super excited about that.
You love him.
He's my favorite. He has 3 just in the Lent section. So does Isaac Watts. He has 3. So there's also hymn writers that just wrote a ton of hymns, and we get to sing a bunch of them during Lent too. So I want to know what your favorites are. Super fast. Elevator speech version of your favorite hymns. Bree, go.
Go to Dark Gethsemane.
Oh, that's a good one.
It is 436 in the LSB, and I'm just going to touch real quick on why it's my favorite.
Do it.
So in high school, I was in the choir, and we went on a spring break choir tour, as many Lutheran choirs do. And I think this was my junior year. We did a rendition of this. It wasn't directly out of the hymnal. It was an arrangement, and I couldn't tell you who did it or when or whatever, but I just remember the setting. We did verse 3 and the lines 3 and 4. God's own sacrifice complete. It is finished. Hear him cry. Like I just remember it was set up in such a way that it is finished. Hear him cry. It was like it built up to almost. It was like double Fs, man. It was like so loud and so much emotion, and just. After we finished that song, it was like I was like exhausted. Like I was spent. And so I just think of that and all of the emotion and all of the anguish and all of the pain that was invested in that song. Obviously pales in comparison to what actually Jesus went through, right? Being flogged and hung on the cross, but like That's the kind of visceral feeling that I think helps me on Good Friday. And that's why I love that hymn.
Probably my all-time favorite Lenten hymn is "O Dearest Jesus," and in particular, it's even just like this one fragment of a verse that does me in, similar to you, and it's "The shepherd dies for sheep who love to wander," and I think that concept of this bizarre contrast of things, that happens in a number of my favorites. So also, what is this bread? With, oh, who am I that I should live and he should die under the rod? My God, why have you not forsaken me? And then also in My Song is Love Unknown, with a murderer they save, the Prince of Life they slay, a murderer they save. These concepts of these bizarre contrasts. Why would it be this way? And yet it is. And it just, those lines always just, I don't know, they always just pierce me whenever I get to those lines in the hymns.
Well, and we get them over and over and over in like probably a majority of our Lenten hymns, because that is literally what we're singing about for this entire season.
So much like my fashion choices, my favorite Lenten hymn isn't quite as high drama as Aaron and Breeze.
It's beige.
Not all the blood of beasts.
Hey, I like that one.
No, I was like, that's dramatic.
Of course you do. Yeah, no, it's very dramatic.
Sorry.
And I love all the hymns that have been mentioned so far, by the way. So this isn't to take away from them in general, but the one that I am very much the fondest of is "In the Cross of Christ I Glory," which is a hymn that I stumbled upon in a big way. Like, it hit me just as I was really beginning to understand the theology of the cross. And so, this was a number of years ago, but just at a season in my life where I was coming to grips with Christianity is about Christ crucified and resurrected for the forgiveness of sins. That's it. And then this song re-entered my life, and this says it, this does it, again, simply, plainly, but also very poetically. I love the opening lines: "In the cross of Christ I glory, towering o'er the wrecks of time." And then the last verse of it is just such a wonderful text to take with you through life. "Bane and blessing, pain and pleasure, by the cross are sanctified. Peace is there that knows no measure, joys that through all time abide." Again, plain, simple, poetic, but not high drama, and yet it just gets at it. This is at the center of the Christian life is a cross. Not my cross, his cross, which is my cross because I'm in him, and that's it. That's the point. So I really love that hymn, and I hope I get to sing it this Lent.
I also have like favorite snippets of hymns. I have like a favorite. I think I have a favorite. Well, at least this year for this Lenten season, I have a favorite hymn. We'll see if it's different next year. But then there's all these other hymns that I also have these like snippets of verses that stick in my head. One of them is 440, "Jesus, I will ponder now." And verse 5, I love the whole of verse 5. "If my sins give me alarm and my conscience grieve me, let your cross my fear disarm, peace of conscience give me. Help me see forgiveness won by your holy passion." And this is the line that gets me. "If for me God slays his son, God must have compassion." Oh,
Yeah.
it hits you.
Yep.
It just hits you.
Yeah.
And then another one, I'll move on after this, I promise. 438, "A lamb goes on complaining forth." This one, when I was at Concordia in Capella, I believe we recorded this hymn. And one of the guys in our choir, he actually sang, so the whole choir sang the parts of the hymn that aren't in quotations. And then one of our guys who had a wonderful voice, he actually sang the parts in quotations that is supposedly Jesus's words. And so when we were singing it like that in Capella, I mean, that I remember being like overcome by emotion, hearing these words instead of singing them myself. And there's one line O wondrous love, what have you done? The Father offers up his Son, desiring our salvation. O love, how strong you are to save. You lay the one into the grave who built the earth's foundation. Wha-bam. It's so good. Okay. There's a lot of favorites in the group, but the one that came out on top, at least at the time of this recording, is 430. My song is Love Unknown. And when I said that before we started recording, you guys all were like, yeah! So, I mean,
we can do it again if you want.
Yes! Yes!
I wasn't expecting this one to be on top. This isn't typically one of my like super top favorites. It's somewhere in the middle of my favorites list. But then I reread it and it's really good. So this hymn was written by Samuel Crossman, who lived 1625 to 1684 in England, where he was an Anglican clergyman, late 1600s into the 1700s. And if you think about that time period in the context, the larger context of European English religious history, this is, just not too far post-Reformation. A lot of stuff happening in the Anglican Church. Just a ton of history there. If you're interested in church history, you should go read about it in the 15, 16, 1700s. So he was baptized September 28th, 1625 in Suffolk, England, where his father was vicar. He received his bachelor's from Pembroke College, Cambridge in 1645, and his master's from there as well in 1651. He was ordained in the Presbyterian Church and was a pastor during the Civil War and the restoration of Charles II. Before the Restoration...
That's the English Civil War, right?
Yes. Not our Civil War.
Okay.
We weren't a country yet.
Our Civil War is a better one.
I know, but we Americans like to think that every Civil War is all about us.
I'm going to be honest, I had no idea there was an English Civil War.
I didn't either, so I need to go look that up. I should also back up and say this is all from the Hymnal Companion. So, and I am not giving you everything that was in there because that would, just not be cool. So, also it would take us 3 hours to record this. So if this is interesting stuff, go find a Hymnal Companion and read about all the stuff that I'm not actually telling you because I can't fit it all in. So before the restoration of Charles II, Crossman was the vicar of a few churches in Suffolk and Essex. And after the restoration, when the Act of Uniformity, go Google it if you don't know what that is, said all ministers had to be ordained in the Episcopal Church and conform to the newly revised Book of Common Prayer. Hopefully that's a familiar term to a lot of people. Crossman became a non-conforming minister and was put in prison in November 1662.
300 years, dude.
He later conformed and he was episcopally ordained on October 28th, 1665. He became chaplain to the king, which is, I want to know how that happened, actually, and appointed vicar of St. Nicholas, Bristol on December 30th, 1667. He was appointed dean of Bristol on May 24th, 1683, and died on February 4th, 1684. So, like I said, he served during...
Oh, man. Could we, have more history? There's a story there. In 5 years, he went from in jail for being the wrong kind of pastor to chaplain to the king.
I know. I want to know this story, and that part of the story isn't in the Hymnal Supplement or Hymnal Companion. So you will actually have to go find some books or talk to people who know that history. And I actually know a few of those people, so now I'm gonna have to go talk to them.
Go do it.
But yeah, there is definitely a story there, and I've read some historical fiction from this time period, which isn't, of course, a history book, but just the Church of England at this time is just it's crazy. Anyway, this was obviously a very controversial time in church history. So Bristol had a large dissenting population, so he had a difficult task as a conforming clergyman. Tension between Charles II and Parliament made the relationship between the dissenters and the conformers even more difficult. And Crossman's work during this time period really showed that all he wanted was peace between these two sides of the church. He wanted them all to come together and be one church. He based his poem, My Song is Love Unknown, on George Herbert, who lived after our Lutheran Reformation. He might be the greatest devotional poet of all time. If you're into devotional poetry and you haven't read his stuff, go read his stuff.
All time.
It is fantastic.
I will not argue with you on that. I think that is a solid statement.
Yeah. I've sung some of his poems too, and they are fantastic. So highly recommend. 5 stars. The poem My Song is Love Unknown was first published in 1664 in Crossman's collection The Young Man's Meditation. This volume of 9 poems follows the death of Christ, the Christian life, the Last Judgment, the resurrection of the body, and heaven. These poems are similar to Herbert's, although not quite as complex. Crossman borrows a few lines, like Love Unknown and Never Was Grief Like Thine, from Herbert's poem Love Unknown. This poem of Herbert's refers back to the reproaches in the Catholic liturgy for Good Friday, so it's really appropriate to sing this poem of Crossman's during Lent as a return to that ancient liturgical tradition. And side note, if you don't know the reproaches or you haven't sung them in your Good Friday service, go find them in, I don't know what book they're actually in. Go ask your pastor or your director of music at your church to show you the reproaches and sing through them. They're incredible. And it's a great moment in the chief service on Good Friday. Also, one of my childhood memories, which is why I'm probably attached to them so much. But anyway, Crossman's reference to Christ's love unknown is obviously to us on the cross. This love is unknown because it is beyond our human comprehension. The text is very personal. Jesus died for you, and that is very obvious in this hymn, which may be why it's a favorite for a lot of people. So I love this part about the tune. The tune is by John Ireland, who lived 1879 to 1962. So he set this to music well after Samuel Crossman lived. Samuel Crossman's book was rediscovered by St. Daniel Sedgwick, who reprinted it in 1863. And while 4 stanzas of My Song is Love Unknown were used with a different tune in the Anglican hymn book in 1868, the tune we now know was requested by Geoffrey Shaw for the Public School Hymn Book, which is a curious title, and I really want to know what that book was used for, in 1919. And it took John Ireland 15 minutes to write this tune on a piece of scrap paper. There you have it.
Wow.
Like, oh, I need to write a tune. Here you go. No big deal. So
I had it on this napkin already.
Right, yeah. So there's My Song is Love Unknown. There's so much more I could talk about, but I can't because I'm going to run out of time, guys.
I want to go back for a moment and say, to speak into your surprise that this was the top of the poll. Of course it was. It's so gorgeous. If there's a reason, we don't sing it more, it's because it's such an emotional and physical marathon of a hymn, and I dare you to try and figure out which verses you could cut out. Yeah. You can't. Yeah. You start My Song is Love Unknown, you are in it until the end. You will be weeping. You will be it's like you get to the end and you're like, I'm tired. Let's go home now. So that's perhaps why it didn't, it isn't sung every Sunday. No. Because you got to just get through it if you start it. But wow, it's a journey of a hymn.
The second favorite hymn was Stricken, Smitten, and Afflicted, which also a great one. Probably also somewhere on my favorites list. I don't know.
Side note here, some family friends once sent out their annual Christmas newsletter, and in it they used that hymn title to describe how their daughter fell in love and is now married. She was stricken, smitten, and afflicted.
Oh, dang.
Oh, that's good.
Thought, there's not a lot more Lutheran than that.
Mm-mm.
That's fantastic.
Yikes on a dozen bikes.
I keep waiting for someone to name their kids or their dogs or something, like Stricken, Smitten, and Afflicted.
Fantastic.
That would be great. That would be great. That was number 2 in the poll, but I did not choose to talk about that one. You guys can go research that one on your own. Because I had an ulterior motive. Because the third one in the poll was 449-450, Oh Sacred Head Now Wounded, which is a Paul Gerhardt. So this is my excuse. This is my excuse, y'all, to talk about Paul Gerhardt, and I took it.
Yes.
Also because I will also hopefully get to 453, Upon the Cross Extended, which, at least for this season of Lent, is my favorite. It might be different next year, and that's fine. But that's also a Paul Gerhardt. So we're going to do 2 birds in one stone and get 2 Gerhardt hymns in this. Because why not? This is my segment.
I'm excited to hear you talk about Paul Gerhardt because I feel like it's someone that a lot of people in the Lutheran Church are very much like you. They're like, ooh, Paul Gerhardt, I love him so much. And everyone else is going, who's Paul Gerhardt?
Who? Yeah.
Who? So let's clear up some of the confusion. Who is Paul Gerhardt? Why do we care?
I only have 3 paragraphs on him. There is a lot more in the Hymnal Companion, but I couldn't read it. So here, I get to talk about Paul Gerhardt. This is really fantastic. So he has 123 hymns in our hymnal in the Lutheran Service Book. 14 of them are on the Passion of Christ. Pretty good number. And I think why I like them, they usually describe in pretty graphic detail the suffering and death of Christ. I'm drawn to that very stark language. Only Martin Luther outnumbered him in German hymn books. I misspoke. We don't have 123 of his hymns.
I was going to call you on that. I'm pretty sure.
Sorry.
I was determined not to call her because I was like, this is the hymn nerd. I had no idea.
He has 123 hymns. 17 of those are in our Lutheran Service Book.
And 14
of his total.
Right. Got it.
Are on the Passion of Christ. I am sorry. I got so excited. I read my notes wrong.
Okay.
17 of his hymns are on the Lutheran Service Book. Sorry. Continuing. Gerhardt was born in Grafenhainichen. There we go. Saxony. On March 12th, 1607. And this is the time that the Holy Roman Empire was still in Germany and plagued by confessional conflicts. If we think about this time in German Lutheran history, just not too far after Martin Luther. So this is a time of a lot of confessional Lutheran conflict. And it affected his own family, who held steadfast to the Book of Concord. And that does affect his hymn writing into his adulthood. He went to school originally in Grafenhainichen. Oh man, I put this word in my notes multiple times, knowing I would have to say it, and I still did it. Grafenhainichen, but was soon sponsored to attend the Royal Academy at Grimma, and that's where he began to develop his poetic skills as he read Latin classical poetry and studied hymns and songs. He graduated from Grimma in 1627 and continued to study at the University of Wittenberg, ding, 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 where he was taught by professors who tenaciously held to the Lutheran confessions. So that more than likely shaped the text writing, the hymn writing that he was doing at this point and continued to do. So this was the time of the 30 Years' War. And if you know anything about Gerhardt, you probably know that he lived during the 30 Years' War, and that also influenced a lot of his hymn writing. So the 30 Years' War was 1618 to 1648, and this war hit Gerhardt very hard. He experienced a lot of tragedy from this point forward in his life. His hometown was completely destroyed, including his childhood home, his childhood church. Everything was completely gone. So he stayed in Wittenberg until 1642, when he went to Berlin. There he began to really write his poetry, and he met Johann Krüger, who was the cantor of St. Nikolai in Berlin. And Krüger put his texts to music and published them in 1647 in Praxis Pietatis Mellica. And Krüger was really the one who saw his talent and really got his name out. Without Krüger, we may not have known as many of his hymns as we do now. But because of his backing and because of him seeing Gerhardt's talent, he published these hymns. In 1649, Gerhardt was finally called to a parish in Mittenwald. So he had not received a call to any parish at this point because of the war. There was just so much devastation that there was nowhere else for him to go at this point. So this is when he married Anna Maria Barthold and continued to write hymns. He returned to Berlin in 1657 to be the senior pastor at St. Nikolai. He was dismissed from there in 1666 because he refused to disavow his confessional Lutheran heritage and assimilate into the Calvinist Lutheran way. So he was basically kicked out because he wouldn't recant his confessional Lutheran views. So there's another thing that was not great in his life. And after that point, he also lost his wife and he lost 4 of his 5 children. So he experienced so much tragedy and sorrow in his life. And you really see that come through in the texts that he writes, and maybe why there's an emotional connection, to a lot of his hymn writing. After that point, he received a call to Lüben, and he served in Lüben until he died May 27, 16 1876. There is the short version of Gerhardt. There's a lot more out there. So
this is a man who, for the last part of his life, pretty much had nothing left but Jesus.
pretty much.
Is that what I'm getting? Yeah.
Yep.
And that, I think, does definitely come through in the poetry.
It does. It does. Reliance on Christ alone is about it. All right, I'm going to fly through these last two because otherwise this is going to be an hour episode. 449, 450, that was number 3 in the group. It is also one of my favorites. It's very old. So the original Latin text, if you look in the hymnal, it says it's attributed to Bernard of Clairvaux, who lived 1090 to 1153 until the early 20th century. It's actually a hymn cycle. The original Latin was a hymn cycle, so it's a hymn of hymns. And each stanza of the hymn, it would speak about a different part of Jesus. So it would speak about the feet, the knees, hands, side, breast, heart, and face of Christ on the cross.
I never knew that.
I didn't either because it's the Latin version. It's not actually in the English. That's why. I thought that was fascinating, though. Paul Gerhardt took these Latin texts, loosely translated them into German, and then James Waddell, Alexander, and August Cruel, and an unidentified translator, translated the Gerhardt texts into English for the Christian Lyre in 1830 and Hymn Book for the use of evangelical Lutheran schools and congregations. That is a long title. In 1879. And if you look in the hymnal companion, you'll see what happened with the texts, why it's not obvious to us that each verse is a body part, I guess, because of the way that they were translated from Latin to German to English and the way that verses have kind of gotten mashed together. We don't have that clear distinction in our English version. So I really want to go read the original Latin. I think that would be really cool. The controversy about whether or not Bernard of Clairvaux wrote these hymns is pretty complex. You can read the whole thing in the hymnal companion. I had to read it like 4 times to understand what was going on. Long story short, we thought it was Bernard because manuscripts in the 15th century attribute the hymn cycle to him. But Catholic hymn scholar F.J. Mohn said in 1853 that no manuscripts from Bernard's time existed with his writing. So in 1909, a book included a transcription of the text from an unknown manuscript from 1320, and the text cites Arnulf of Leuven as the author. And remember, Clairvaux lived, 1090 to 1153, so this is 200 years after. Arnulf lived 1200 to 1251-ish. He was abbot of the Cistercian Abbey of Villers in present-day Belgium. Earliest sources have only 5 hymns, probably Arnulf, and not including the stanzas for the heart and the breast. Those were added later, probably so it could be used during Holy Week. So you'd have 7 of them. You could sing 1 each day. A revised edition from the 15th century is the one that Paul Gerhardt would have known and is a source for the English hymn. So that's how that all comes together for the text. The tune was composed by Hans Leo Hassler, first appearing in 1601, and LSB has 2 forms of the tune. So if you've looked in your hymnal, it's 449 and 450. 450 is the original rhythmic version, so it's the much older version. 449 is the isorhythmic version, which developed later, probably because of the slowing down of congregational singing tempos during the 17th and 18th century. Ask your director of music or your favorite music nerd about that, because there's actually some really interesting history having to do with singing and architecture and instruments and everything. But anyway, the isorhythmic version is by Bach. So, of course, it's amazing. Bach's arrangement is from the St. Matthew Passion, BWV 244. First performed in 1727 and 1729. Fun fact, I actually prefer the original rhythmic version. I mean, I love Bach's, but I actually prefer the rhythmic version because it feels more contemplative. And I really like the tenor line, and it's fun to sing it in parts. But both are great, obviously.
I'm actually with you on that. I prefer the rhythmic version of this and actually of A Mighty Fortress, which I know some people are not crazy about. But I love Bach, but I think he went a little overboard in trying to make every single thing he wrote super neat and tidy. And I like the messier, rhythmic, syncopated, dancey
Yeah, it's fun to dance
Not that
to
Bach
them.
doesn't dance, but you know what I mean. In his chorales, he does sort of, make things nice and neat around the edges.
It's true.
And maybe the originals weren't as neat.
Yeah, I really want to know. I need to ask my husband more about the congregational singing part, because there's some very interesting history behind all of the the speeds of congregational singing. If you're into that kind of thing and nerdy about it, it's actually really interesting. Anyway, I need to wrap this up. So 3 paragraphs on what is my favorite for this Lenten season, Upon the Cross Extended, another Gerhardt. So it's a great descriptive text, focuses on the passion of Christ and his redemptive work. First appeared in Johann Kruger's compilation of Gerhardt's work, Praxis Pietatis Milica, in 1647. This is the hymn of the day for Tuesday of Holy Week, and also... What? It is!
I laugh because Tuesday of Holy Week is like one of the only days in Holy Week where you don't go to church.
But you can still sing this hymn at home because it's the hymn of the day. That's why I'm telling you.
Yeah.
It's true.
It's also useful on Good Friday and during Lent. So there. The translation is attributed to John Kelly in 1867. So that's, 200 years later we get it into English. So the interesting part about this is actually the tune. I love the text, but the interesting part to tell you all about is the tune, O Welt ich muss dich lassen, which is also used for Lutheran Service Book 396, Arise and Shine in Splendor, which, fun fact, is one of my favorite Epiphany hymns too. The settings are also different between the two. If you want to look at those two, the settings are different. They give the hymns a different feel. So this tune was popular in 16th century Germany, generally set to the text of Innsbruck, Ich muss dich lassen, or Innsbruck, I must leave you. It's about a guy being sad because he has to leave Innsbruck, which is in Austria, because he's leaving his girl behind, and he's pledging his faithfulness to her and asks God to watch over her. So this is like a 16th century pop song, pretty much.
Can I just say that German pop music has come a long way in 400 years?
Kind of great. I'm pretty sure I laughed out loud when I was reading that.
Whether it's progressed or digressed remains to be seen.
So there's also a lot of super nerdy stuff about this tune, and all of this, I didn't even read it because I didn't understand it. Lots of big words. So if you're really into musical settings, you should read about it in the companion. There's way more information, and I couldn't even translate it into normal person English because I couldn't even understand it. So it's not totally clear who wrote the tune originally, because it's a medieval German tune. A lot of times they just weren't written down. It's attributed to Heinrich Isaac, who lived 1450 to 1517. May or may not have been him. Earliest printed sacred song with this tune is from 1581. So it's a very old tune, and it's with this season of Lent's favorite hymn, Upon the Cross Extended. So there you go. That is all I have. Those are all of my notes. So any last comments, ladies, before I really need to stop this recording because it's been a long time.
Lent is
one
favorite
comment
time for singing.
Well, that's the irony. We always I think of Christmas and Easter as being the great musical seasons of the church. I mean, those are when we have the concerts and the caroling and all of that. But so I have not traditionally thought of Lent as this musically rich time of year, but I think I'm now a convert. So thank you.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good music, and it's not like the happy, joyful stuff that we get during Christmas and during Easter. It's great in a very different way because of the difference in the texts and what the texts are telling us. I mean, it's not going to, well, it might leave you happy actually, because a lot of these do have a lot of gospel in them because of when we sing them in the church year, and they all point us to the suffering and death of Christ, which is a great thing for us to be meditating on. So if you're a hymn nerd like me and you listen to this and you want more, that's awesome. There's always hymnary.org if you can't afford a hymnal companion or you don't know someone that has one. You can always research stuff on hymnary.org. It's an awesome place. It has so much stuff about every hymnal you can possibly imagine too. Otherwise, thanks to CPH and their awesome work with the hymnal companion. This is life-changing for all of my Hymn Sing with Sarah segments. So I'm just going to go read it. I posted on Facebook that I need to take a sabbatical just to read the whole thing because there's so much in it. So join the Facebook group, ladies. There's the poll there still with all of the favorite Lenten hymns. Share your favorite Lenten hymns. Snap some pictures of what you're singing on Sunday mornings, Wednesday nights, and share with us what you love about your favorite hymns. You can find all of our episodes at kfuo.org/Lutheran Ladies Lounge or on your favorite podcasting app, of course, and share us with your friends. You're listening to the Lutheran Ladies Lounge podcast. I'm Sarah.
I'm Erin.
I'm going to get me a hymnal companion.
And I'm Rachel.
Views and opinions expressed on the Lutheran Ladies Lounge podcast may not represent the official position of the management or ownership of KFUO Radio, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. The Lutheran Ladies Lounge is produced by KFUO Radio and available at kfuo.org or wherever you get your podcasts. Join our community on Facebook in the Lutheran Ladies Lounge. I also brought the hymnal companion in case I needed to reference it. It's huge. I made a separate trip up to the studio just to bring the hymnal companion.
Is that your new Snuggie that you sleep with?
Yes.
It's my lovey.
It's really hard and boxy though, so it doesn't work.